Dr. Evans, you've explained today that your conclusion is that the cause of death in baby C's case arose from the splinting of his diaphragm.
That is... The mechanics of that, yes, is correct.
You've had the relevant clinical material and the statements relating to baby C for over 5 years or thereabouts, 4.5 years, haven't you?
Yes.
You've considered other cases featuring in this trial, where you have provided reports giving the opinion that splinting of the diaphragm is a cause of death, like baby G, haven't you?
Yes.
Before today, just now, you've never suggested that splinting of the diaphragm on the 13th of June is the cause of death for baby C, have you?
That's correct.
This is the first time we're hearing it right now, isn't it?
Yes.
You are alert to the possibility of splinting of a diaphragm from the other cases you've looked at, aren't you?
Yes.
Your opinion, I'm going to suggest, and as far as you can go on the material available to you alone, would not take us to splinting of the diaphragm on the 13th of June, would it?
Well, I don't jump to conclusions, so therefore, as we discussed earlier, this death was unexpected and could not be explained as a result of one or more of the usual illnesses that premature babies get. Doctors work as a team. We rely on opinion from other sources, and if you look at the combination of what I thought his clinical situation was, plus what I've read from Dr. Mana Raidi's report and others, and on top of that, the gaseous distension in the stomach, putting it all together, that is an acceptable cause of collapse in my opinion.
If you really thought that splinting of the diaphragm in the case of baby C was a cause of collapse, you would have said that before today, Dr. Evans.
Not necessarily. I think when I came to this court, first of all, I said that having prepared these reports initially over 5 years ago, in virtually all of the cases, I've benefited from additional information since then, from other experienced medical people, and if you receive additional information from other people in other disciplines, which allows you as a clinician to change or modify your opinion, that is what doctors do. I was functioning very much as a clinician in any case of this nature.
I suggest, Dr. Evans, you have been driven by something which leads you to support the allegation rather than something based on the facts beneath it. That's what's going on here, isn't it?
No. The fact is this baby collapsed, having been stable up until more or less the minute of his collapse, and therefore one has to explain that.
I just want to deal with what you have said in, is it 8 reports that you've prepared in the case of baby C plus 1 joint report? That's correct, isn't it?
I think so, yes.
Yes, and again, just to make it quite clear, in not one of them before today, have you suggested that splinting of the diaphragm on the 13th of June was a cause of death?
That is correct.
The first report that we heard about, which is on the 7th of November 2017, in that report, Dr. Evans, you said that, your paragraph 33, one may never know the cause of baby C's collapse. He was at great risk of unexpected collapse. That's paragraph 33 of that first report.
All of this is correct.
So you agree he, in fact, was at great risk of unexpected collapse?
He was at risk of one or more of the complications you get in preterm babies we discussed earlier.
Your words are...
Sorry. But although he was at risk of them, he was in a neonatal unit designated to look after him with continuous monitoring of essential criteria such as oxygen, etc. So therefore, the risk was there. This is why neonatal units exist. They are to look after babies at risk of death, collapse, or serious injury. Therefore, the risk was there. And if he had not collapsed on the 13th, he could well have, the risks were there until he was much bigger. So the risk is there. The risk is there constantly. But although the risk was there, I was satisfied. What on earth is going on here? I think we heard Dr. Gibbs say he couldn't explain why this baby collapsed either. That's a pretty straightforward statement, actually. One may never identify the cause of baby C's collapse.
Are you saying...
I'm not the only doctor giving evidence on this particular baby, and therefore they will give evidence in due course. So that's as far as I could get, based on the information I had in 2017.
Let's be clear, what you say there, based upon the records that you had access to and those statements at that point, was one may never identify the cause of his collapse.
Yes.
You were ready to acknowledge that then?
Yes.
And you were ready to acknowledge he was at great risk of unexpected collapse, do you agree?
Yes.
You also formed the view that you cannot exclude the role of infection in his collapse, paragraph 34.
Yes, I am quite happy to elaborate on that.
Let me just ask before you do. That's on the basis of the sort of material in the medical notes that we've been looking at now, isn't it?
Yes.
And faced with that, back in 2017, you were able to say that we cannot exclude the role of infection, weren't you?
Infection was a factor in baby C's short life. We know that. We know he had pneumonia, so it was a factor. It is possible to suggest that if he did not have pneumonia, he may not have suffered the collapse. No, I want to rephrase that. His pneumonia was under control. His pneumonia was under control. That's the important thing. He was on antibiotics, he was requiring hardly any additional oxygen, and his saturations were spot on. So therefore his pneumonia was under control. But it's my role. I was investigating this unexpected collapse. It was my role not to give an impartial view looking at all the issues. Looking at all these issues. In other words, I don't prepare partisan reports, so therefore if you've got a CRP of 22, I've got to bear it in mind. If you've got an X-ray that shows pneumonia, I have to bear it in mind. Are a CRP of 22 and a pneumonia on X-ray in a baby requiring 25% oxygen sufficient explanation to cause his collapse? In my opinion, no.
Your opinion, sorry Dr. Evans, please continue if there's more.
No, I've finished.
Your opinion, do you agree, in that report was that you cannot exclude the role of infection?
Infection was a part of baby C's general status during his life.
You didn't say in that report infection was part of his general status. Dealing with your opinion as to death, you said you cannot exclude the role of infection in his collapse. It's there, Dr. Evans.
Infection was a factor in his life. Did it contribute? It didn't cause his death. That's what I believe. Didn't kill him.
Saying you cannot exclude the role of infection in his collapse acknowledges that it may have played a part, doesn't it?
It may have. It was a contributory factor. We've heard about the 4 main contributory factors earlier today.
Well, now you've come to give evidence to the jury. On the same occasion that you introduced splinting of the diaphragm, you have today discounted infection in any way, haven't you?
No, I have not discounted infection. I have explained to everybody that the report of Dr. Manarides, who's the pathologist, highlights the issue of abdominal distension causing the diaphragm, causing splinting of the diaphragm. Now,
can I just ask you something about that?
Please do.
You are not just here to repeat what's in the report of Dr. Manarides, are you?
I am here, right. What we do as clinicians is this. We base our opinion on an accumulation of information, okay? Nothing to do with being in a court or anything. We rely on 3 items of information: the history, the examination, and the investigations. So we put all of that together. In a patient who sadly dies, we then turn to pathologists to see if they can enlighten us on information that we are not too certain about. There's no point in getting a pathology opinion. If I knew everything, I would not need a pathology opinion. So therefore, you need all of those things. The greater the bits of information you have, then the more likely you are in reaching a diagnosis. So in this particular baby, I'm not going to repeat what I said earlier. We know the history, he was a preterm baby, we know what the examination findings showed, we know what the investigations showed. The markers of infection are pretty marginal, a CRP of 22. In an otherwise, a baby who wasn't just had an infection, it's important, Mr. Myers, to know he was recovering from an infection. If I didn't say that too clearly in my report, well, there we are. But his supportive therapy wasn't getting worse, it was getting less, because for the last 12 hours of his life, he was off his CPAP, right? He was off his CPAP. All he had was Optiflow, which is basically nasal prongs to deliver, so you know exactly what percentage of oxygen the baby's getting. So therefore, respiratory-wise, he wasn't even staying the same. He was improving.
Can I ask you this, Dr. Evans? Are you trying to use what you anticipate will be the evidence of Dr. Manarides, the pathologist, to find a way of producing an allegation as to the harm that was done on the 13th?
No.
Which you haven't made before today.
Sorry, this baby was put in harm's way.
That's something, so far as the 13th is concerned, that until you gave your evidence now, you have not identified to this point on the 13th, have you?
What I did initially was...
Can I ask that first, please? Can you answer that question?
Ask it again.
You have not in these reports, up until your evidence now, identified any specific way in which he was put in harm's way on the 13th of June, have you?
Not in this first report, no.
And you are coming up with things here now as we go along to try to support an allegation of harm on the 13th of June, aren't you?
No, I'm coming up with clinically proven mechanisms that explain why babies collapse.
Well, let's move then to your next report, the second one. One specific reference was made to it, of the 31st of May 2018, 6 months after the first one.
Yes.
In that report you say at paragraph 36, having had time to reflect from the first report, one may never identify the cause of baby C's collapse.
That is correct.
He was at great risk of unexpected collapse.
Yes.
That was your considered opinion, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
And that's the position, isn't it? One may never identify the cause of baby C's collapse, and he's at great risk of unexpected collapse.
Right, he was at great risk, okay? He was at great risk. There's quite a big difference between being at risk of unexpected collapse and actually finding a cause for it. Again, as I have said, as a clinician, you play as a team, and part of your team in a child who sadly dies is the pathology.
Is your team the other prosecution experts, Dr. Evans?
No.
Who's your team, so we can be clear?
The medical team. I have not seen any report that comes up with an explanation regarding baby C's collapse, other than what I have said today and what Dr. Manarides has said in his report and what other people will say. I have read reports that are, I don't mean this disrespectfully, I've read reports that come up with this idea and that idea and the other idea and all that sort of stuff, which is very interesting to me because I'm a clinician. I want to know what could have caused all this, but I have not seen a single report, and I am happy to be corrected on this one. I have not seen a single medical report that says I am wrong. Baby C died because of something else. I have not seen a single report that gets off the fence and tells me that. I am happy to be corrected, Mr. Myers, but I have not. Therefore, this would always be this case, right? This case would always be a challenging case for any clinician. And it's a challenging case because we know of his various pathological problems, so it is quite difficult to separate the pathological problems, infection, feeding, etc., that we heard about earlier. It's quite difficult to separate those from an event where he was placed in harm's way as a result of some kind of deliberate act. Now, I don't think I could do that alone, but putting all the evidence together, then that is where we are.
I'm looking at what you say here, Dr. Evans. You don't mention in this report, the second one we came to, anything about splinting of the diaphragm on the 13th, do you?
No. You've said that several times, and we have all heard it.
There are several reports, aren't there?
Yes.
In none of which do you mention splinting of the diaphragm on the 13th, do you?
No, you have mentioned that, and I have said, no, there isn't.
You also, in this report, paragraph 37, repeat that you cannot exclude the role of infection in his collapse, don't you? Paragraph 37.
It is a factor in his general status, yes.
And that's the truth of the matter, isn't it? You cannot exclude infection from his collapse.
What you cannot do, you cannot exclude infection as a factor in his general status. What I can do, looking at all of this, remember I prepared a load of reports, looking at all of this, is this. He's got an infection, but it's under control. And we all, I've listened to the evidence from the other people. We've all heard the evidence from the local teams.
It's your evidence we're looking at now, Dr. Evans.
Yes, I'm aware of that, and that's my evidence.
Let's move forward to about a year or so later, the 26th of March 2019, the next report. Paragraph 13.
I don't have paragraphs on my copy. Hang on.
It's page 6 of 7.
I beg your pardon, I do.
Two things here, page 6 of 7. Having reviewed all of this about a year later, you say, and it's in the center of that paragraph, it's therefore probable that infection was a significant factor in baby C's collapse during the late hours of the 13th of June 2015.
Yes, I've seen that, yes.
And you recognize, then, that infection may be a significant factor in his collapse, didn't you?
That was my opinion at the time, and, as I have said, if, as a clinician, I receive additional information that allows me to change my opinion or modify my opinion, that is what we do as clinicians.
But nothing has changed with regard to evidence of infection, Dr. Evans, since then. You may have heard other things from Dr. Manarides, but nothing's changed on the evidence of infection, has it?
No, he had an infection, he had pneumonia, It was on the monitoring that was present on the little baby. His monitoring was fine.
The same evidence of infection is before the jury now, as was before the jury at the time you came to that conclusion, isn't it?
If this, we're not relying on my evidence alone. With this particular baby, I couldn't take it any further than what we've discussed this morning and confirmed just now.
But you see, in March 2019, the possibility of someone forcing air down the NGT was in your mind, wasn't it?
It was, actually.
But not on the 13th of June, yes?
I don't know what you mean.
Let me help. If we go to paragraph 14, please, Dr. Evans, the jury.
Oh, yes.
The jury will recall we've seen the abdominal X-ray for the 12th of June at 12:38.
Yes.
And as to that, what you do say, we've had a paragraph where you say, it's therefore probable the infection was a significant factor in baby C's collapse during the late hours on the 13th of June. In the next paragraph, you go on to say this: I am suspicious of the gaseous distension reported on the abdominal X-ray on the 12th of June and wonder whether this represents inappropriate management, whereby his attendant inserted excess air into his stomach via his nasogastric tube, doing so in the knowledge that it would cause the infant discomfort and distress.
That was a possibility that crossed my mind at the time.
At the time? Just at the time?
No, when I wrote this statement.
When you say at the time, is it a possibility that came in and went out with this report, or did it stay with you for longer?
I don't know what you mean by that, actually.
Is it a possibility that existed only when you did this report, or have you stuck with the theory that there was air forced down the NGT on the 12th of June?
Right. Whether...
Can you answer that question first? Help the jury with an answer, please, Doctor.
With regard to the 12th, that was one option. The other option was the CPAP, because he was on CPAP at the time, which he wasn't when he collapsed, but he was on CPAP at the time. So that was one option. The other option was inadvertent air, and we can't discuss it now. We'll discuss it later in this trial in relation to other cases. Therefore, by this time, I was aware of the fact that several babies had collapsed, some had died, in Chester, and yes, so all of this was adding to my anxieties about what was causing all of this, yes.
And your view, back in March 2019, was that there could have been deliberate harm done on the 12th of June via the NGT, yes?
Can't rule it out. There were two scenarios. You can't rule it out, two scenarios. That's one of them. The second one is he had CPAP. He was on CPAP at the time.
If we come forwards, there was, we know, a report prepared after a joint meeting of experts in August of this year, wasn't there?
Yes.
And Dr. Marnarides was present at least for part of that meeting, wasn't he?
Yes.
The date of the report, there are various dates on it with the signatures, but we are looking at a period at or about the end of August. You signed it, Dr. Evans, on August 24th, 2022.
Yes.
Page M1257, my lord. That's where it starts. At page M1260, page 4 of the report, you were dealing with opinions on baby C. This is a report that you signed off on really a month or two before this trial commenced, wasn't it?
Yes.
In that report you say, the massive gastric dilation seen on the X-ray of the 12th of June was most likely due to deliberate exogenous administration of air via the NGT. That's what you say, isn't it?
That was our conclusion at the time. I think this was a joint report, I think.
Yes, but that's a conclusion between you and Dr. Bohin, isn't it?
Yes.
By the time you did that, you had all the material you required on the care of baby C, didn't you?
Yes, I think so.
Yes, and armed with that material, your view was that the 12th of June was probably due to deliberate exogenous administration of air. Is that correct?
That was a possibility, yes.
Most likely due to that, you say. In that report, a matter of months or a month or two before this trial commenced. You make no suggestion that the diaphragm had been splinted by excessive air on the 13th of June, do you?
Right. That follows. Actually, perhaps it wasn't said specifically.
Can we establish that first of all?
Yes, that is correct.
You didn't.
That is correct.
There are about 13 different points under baby C.
Sorry, I haven't got a copy.
Let me ask this. If you had wanted to say it was splinting of the diaphragm, nothing stopped you from saying that, did it?
If it wasn't said, it wasn't said.
No, it wasn't said because it wasn't something that you had entertained as a possibility at that point, was it?
Right, that is incorrect. What we have discussed here is... Let's stick with the 12th, okay? There was a distinct possibility that baby C had excess air injected into his stomach on the 12th. That's what we said. At the same time, we realized that however much air was in his stomach, he was still stable from a respiratory point of view. So therefore, so excess air injected into the stomach, it's a complicated description, this. Air injected into the stomach will cause the stomach dilation, but it'll compromise the baby only if there's sufficient air, and there's sufficient pressure to splint the diaphragm, right? Now, on the 12th, baby C was in CPAP, which is a pretty non-invasive method of respiratory support. So therefore, however the air went in, it would have been insufficient to splint the diaphragm on the 12th, okay? Because if it had splinted the diaphragm on the 12th, he'd have died or collapsed on the 12th. He didn't. So therefore, however much air went into his stomach and intestines on the 12th of June, so we're talking 36 hours prior to his collapse, that, and I have no idea how much air went in. However much went in was insufficient to destabilize baby C from a respiratory point of view. So therefore there was nothing to suggest that the extra air would have splinted the diaphragm at that time, okay? That was the last X-ray, by the way. That was taken, that's not a criticism, by the way, the one on the 12th. That was the last X-ray. So the only X-ray evidence we have is from the 12th. We don't have any from the 13th. Therefore, I hope that distinguishes what I think is a mechanism, a scenario, that occurred on the 12th, compared to the scenario that occurred that led to his collapse.
Dr. Evans,
The two are different, both in relation to volume of air that got into his stomach and intestines, and in other words, it did not compromise him. And the second thing, which we're aware of, is that he had CPAP. He was on CPAP as well. So the two events are quite different in the way that they affected baby C.
Looking at your opinions, before we get to what lies behind this, your opinions and the way you have formed them, and I'd just like you to be absolutely clear that as of a month or two before this trial, whatever may or may not happen as a result of it, your view was that the 12th of June was intentional harm, wasn't it?
That was a possibility. Yes, it was.
Yes, that was your view. At the same time, you had nothing to say about splinting of the diaphragm on the 13th, did you?
On the 13th, I think he collapsed.
No. In that report, your view, Dr. Evans. I'm sorry if the question wasn't clear. At that time, you had nothing to say in August of this year as to splinting of the diaphragm on the 13th, had you?
No.
No. What you have done in your evidence today is introduce something new with the purpose of supporting the allegation, rather than explaining the facts, isn't it?
No, that is incorrect. I'm here to support the jury and everyone in this court, trying to explain what was it that led to a baby who was very small and premature suddenly collapsing, and where resuscitation was unsuccessful. In doing that, I am totally upfront in saying that I am not relying on my opinion alone. I'm relying on other medical people's opinion as well. That is what doctors do. We do it all of the time. That is what we do. Okay? So, I'm here to assist the members of the jury in sorting out what is a pretty complicated case.
I'm suggesting to you, Dr. Evans, that you are reaching for things that support the allegation, rather than reflecting the facts.
Well, I disagree with you. I have just explained the facts to you. And that's it.